I'm going to start this story not at the dinner table, but 20 minutes before. I was in the bathroom of that upscale steakhouse, staring at myself in the mirror. I was 25. I had just closed the biggest deal of my career, a deal that had taken 2 years to build. And my parents, for the first time in 5 years, had flown into the city to celebrate my birthday. I remember looking at my reflection, fixing my tie, and thinking, finally. They see me. They finally respect me. I felt this warmth, this validation I'd been chasing my whole life. I walked back to the table. They'd already ordered champagne. My mom was smiling. My dad stood up to clink my glass. I thought it was the best moment of my life. And then my mom, still smiling that sweet smile, leaned in and said the sentence that detonated my entire existence. She said, "You know, honey, we only kept you for the tax benefits." And my dad didn't flinch. He nodded. He laughed. He said, "Best write-off we ever had." This is the story of how I learned my entire childhood was a lie, a financial transaction, and what I did to make sure the IRS got their final say. To understand why that sentence crushed me, you have to understand my family dynamic. I have an older brother, Liam. Liam was the golden child. You know the type. He could do no wrong. He failed a class? The teacher was biased. He crashed a car? The deer jumped out of nowhere. He was the prince. I was the afterthought. The quiet one. The one who kept his head down. I was a good kid. I got good grades, I stayed out of trouble, I worked 3 jobs in high school just so I wouldn't have to ask them for money. But my parents, they weren't necessarily cruel. They were just absent. Emotionally, physically. They provided the roof, the food, the clothes. But the warmth? The "I'm proud of you"? That was reserved for Liam. I remember asking my mom once, when I was about 10, why they didn't come to my school play. I had one line. She patted me on the head and said, "We work hard to give you this life, honey. You have no idea the sacrifices we make." I always thought that meant they were working late to pay for my soccer cleats or my school trips. I internalized it. I thought, I need to be less of a burden. I need to be so successful that they don't have to sacrifice anymore. Then they'll love me. That's a dangerous thought to plant in a kid's head. That their love is transactional. But I didn't know the half of it. Liam, of course, was a mess. He floated through life on their approval and their money. He bounced from job to job, always with some exciting new venture that was really just them paying his rent. I, on the other hand, became hyper-successful. I moved to a different city. I built a career in finance from the ground up. I was driven by that ghost of approval. I thought if I just made enough money, bought a big enough house, closed a big enough deal, they'd finally look at me the way they looked at Liam. My 25th birthday was that moment. I had just closed a deal that netted my firm, and me, a life-changing amount of money. I invited them to the city, to the nicest restaurant I knew. I was going to tell them over dinner. I was going to finally be seen. The dinner started perfectly. We ordered the expensive wine. My dad, for the first time ever, asked me about my work without a dismissive tone. My mom was hanging on my every word. It felt surreal. It felt like a dream. I remember thinking, this is it. The moment I've been working for. The main courses were cleared. The champagne flutes were refilled. My dad cleared his throat. He had this look on his face, a mix of pride and something else. Calculation. "Son," he said. "We have a birthday toast for you." I grinned like an idiot. I was ready for the love to finally pour out. My mom stood up, glass in hand. She looked at my dad, then at me, and said those words. "You know, honey, we only kept you for the tax benefits." She laughed. A light, airy laugh, like she was sharing a funny family anecdote. I froze. The smile was still frozen on my face, but my brain was static. What? I managed to whisper. My dad jumped in, swirling his champagne. He wasn't looking at me with love, he was looking at me like I was a finished project. An investment that had finally matured. Oh, come on, don't look so serious, he chuckled. It was a different time. The tax credits for adoptions back then were incredible. A real windfall. We were just talking about it the other day, weren't we, Deb? How we should do a happy hour toast to the IRS for sending us our little miracle. Adopted. The word hit me like a freight train. I wasn't just an afterthought. I wasn't just less loved. I was a stranger. A financial instrument. You adopted me? The words felt alien in my mouth. My mom sat back down, waving her hand dismissively. Well, yes. We never hid that from you, did we? Oh. Well. I suppose we just never got around to the official talk. But honestly, honey, it's not a big deal. The point is, we got you, and we got a great return on our investment. A great return on their investment. They weren't here to celebrate me. They were here to congratulate themselves on a successful tax dodge that had just turned 25. My mom then leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. So, speaking of returns, we heard about your big bonus from that deal. That's wonderful, honey. And, well, your brother is looking at a really exciting opportunity. He needs a little bridge loan, just $50,000, to get it off the ground. And since you're our return on investment. There it was. The punchline. The setup. The dinner wasn't about me. It was a business meeting to collect on their asset. They had created me, nurtured me for 18 years, all for this moment. They were here to cash out. I didn't say a word. I just stood up. I pulled out my black American Express card, the one I'd been so proud to get, and I slammed it on the table. I didn't even look at the bill. Dinner's on the investment, I said, my voice shaking. And I walked out. I heard my dad call after me, "Oh, don't be so dramatic. We're just being honest." I made it to the street. The city lights were blurry. I leaned against a building and just broke. I wasn't crying for the parents I lost. I was crying for the little boy who tried so hard. The little boy who thought if he was just good enough, quiet enough, successful enough, he'd be worthy of love. That little boy never existed. He was just a receipt. For the next 3 days, I didn't answer their calls. They went from confused, to annoyed, to angry. The texts changed from "we love you, let's talk" to "don't be a child about this" to "we are your parents, and you owe us the respect of a conversation." On the 3rd day, I was sitting in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, when I got an email. It was from my mom. Subject line, Family Records. I almost deleted it. But I opened it. It was a scan of a document. The adoption papers. My original birth certificate was attached. My birth mother's name was there. She was 16 when she had me. And then, at the bottom of the papers, was the thing that changed everything. A schedule. A breakdown of the adoption costs. And next to the line item for the federal adoption tax credit, someone had written in pen, in my mother's handwriting, "Total refund, $13,460. Best money we never spent." They had kept the paperwork. They had annotated it. They treated it like a trophy. That's when the shaking stopped. The hurt turned cold. And the cold turned into a plan. You see, working in finance, I have one very specific skill. I understand how money moves. And more importantly, I understand audits. I started digging. I'm not a lawyer, but I know how to research. I looked up the specific adoption tax credit laws from the year I was adopted. The credit was non-refundable, meaning it could only be used to offset tax liability. But to claim it, you had to actually adopt a child with the intent of creating a permanent, loving family. That's the key phrase in the tax code, for the purpose of creating a permanent family. My parents hadn't done that. They had openly admitted, in a public restaurant, that they did it for the money. That's tax fraud. They claimed a credit under false pretenses. But that wasn't all. Over the next week, with the help of a private investigator I hired, I built a case file. They had claimed me as a dependent for 22 years, through college, even after I graduated, even though I paid for my own tuition and they provided zero support. They had likely committed thousands of dollars in fraud. And then, the final piece. The bridge loan for Liam? I had my investigator look into Liam's exciting opportunity. It was a pyramid scheme. A shady cryptocurrency startup that was already under investigation by the SEC. I had everything. The audio. I had texted my friend at the table next to us, and he had accidentally recorded the whole tax benefits conversation on his phone. I had the annotated adoption papers. I had the PI's report on Liam's scam. My parents didn't see me as a son. They saw me as an investment. Fine. I would treat them like a liability. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. I wanted to correct the record. So, I compiled 3 packets. The first packet was for my parents. It was a detailed breakdown of their potential tax fraud, the statutes of limitations, the penalties, and the possibility of jail time. It included a transcript of their dinner speech. The second packet was identical, but it was addressed to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I put a sticky note on it, "Attention, fraud detection." The third packet was for Liam. It was the PI's full report on his business partner, including the SEC filing, proving he was about to be wiped out and possibly indicted. I invited them to dinner. The same restaurant. 2 weeks later. They walked in, all huffs and puffs, ready for a fight. My mom sat down, arms crossed. "Well, you finally decided to act like an adult," she snapped. I smiled. A real, calm smile. "Mom. Dad. Thank you for coming. I wanted to apologize for running out the other night." My dad's posture softened immediately. He puffed up. "Good. We're glad you came to your senses. Now, about that loan for your brother." I held up my hand. "Before we get to that, I have some gifts for you. For being such great investors." I pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table to my mom. "What's this?" she asked, suspicious. "Open it." She opened it. Pulled out the first page. It was the transcript of her tax benefits speech. Her face went pale. "I had our conversation recorded, Mom. It's very clear. You didn't adopt for a family. You adopted for a refund. That's fraud." My dad scoffed. "That's nothing. That's 20 years ago. Statute of limitations." I nodded. "You're right, Dad. For the original credit. But here's the thing. To claim that credit, you had to prove I was your dependent. To prove I was your dependent after I was 18, you had to prove you provided more than half my support. I have bank records showing I paid for everything since I was 17. You've been filing fraudulent tax returns every single year since I left for college. That's ongoing fraud. The statute of limitations for those years? Still open." I pulled out the second envelope. This one was thicker. This is the complete file. Bank statements, the adoption papers, the audio transcript, the timeline of dependency fraud. It's all here. My mom's hand was shaking. What are you going to do with that?" "That's up to you," I said. "I have a second copy of this file. It's in an envelope, addressed to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. It has a stamp on it. It just needs to be dropped in a mailbox. My dad's face went from red to purple. You little. You would destroy your own family? I'm not destroying a family, I said, my voice cold as ice. I'm liquidating a bad investment. You taught me that everything is transactional. So, let's make a transaction. I laid down the terms. First, you will sign this document, right now, acknowledging that I am not your financial or emotional responsibility, now or ever. Second, you will never ask me for money again. Not for you, not for Liam. Not a dime. Third, you will never speak to me again. My mom stared at me, tears in her eyes. But I knew they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of a deal gone bad. And if we don't sign, my dad whispered. I picked up the second envelope, the one for the IRS. I held it over my lit birthday candle from the table. The flame licked the corner of the paper. Then I dropped this in the mail on my way home. You have 10 seconds. They signed. They scrawled their names like their lives depended on it, because financially, they did. They grabbed the envelope with their copy of the file, the proof of their own crime, and they fled. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't look back. I sat there for a moment, alone. The waiter came over, nervous. Sir? Is everything all right? I ordered the most expensive dessert on the menu and a glass of the finest scotch they had. And I ate it alone, in peace. That was 3 years ago. I haven't spoken to them since. I heard through a cousin that Liam's pyramid scheme collapsed. He lost everything, and my parents emptied their retirement account to bail him out. The IRS ended up auditing them anyway, not because of me, but because Liam's shady business partner flipped on everyone in a plea deal. They got hit with fines, back taxes, and penalties that wiped out whatever was left. Last I heard, they're living in a small apartment, renting out their old house to make ends meet. My mom actually reached out last month. A friend request on Facebook with a message, "We miss you. Family is everything." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I clicked delete and went back to my life. Because here's the thing I learned. Blood isn't what makes a family. Love isn't transactional. And the best revenge isn't burning someone down, it's building a life so good that their absence feels like a gift. And honestly? That $13,460 tax credit? Best investment they never made.